So it's time for us to go ahead and create our simple web scraper. We're going to start by creating two builders that are going to help us create our search criteria and going to make it a lot more flexible so that if in the future something changes, we can take care of those changes very simply. We're going to create our builders using the builder pattern. But before we even do that, let's create the data that we're going to then construct using our builders. So I will create two folders right here, one called builders, another called data. And in data, I will have something called scrape criteria. There you go. And within that, I will create scrape criteria constructor. So this will have a constructor, and we'll have some properties. So I will say public string data get and set. Then it will have another one called public string regex get set. It will also have something called public regex options, regex option, and we need to import that. And the last one will be list. By the way, we got the get and set. I don't want it to be a field, I want it to be a property. And then I will say scrape criteria but part, which is something we don't have yet, but I will be creating it a little after, once I'm finished with this one. So get and set, and the parts are going to be a new list. So I'm going to initialize this list here, and then I will go ahead and create the actual part side of things. So new item, and in the part we'll have two properties, public string regex is the first property, second property being regex options, regex option get and set. And we need to import this as well. We're done with our data. So basically, you can see that the scrape criteria has a list of parts. Remember from our flowchart, we said that we're going to be looking for an HTML element and then using the parts to drill down inside of that element and see if we want to look for even more stuff, if we have any parts specified. So that's what this part is. We have our scrape criteria and then scrape criteria part that is list within the scrape criteria. Now we can go ahead and create our builders. So the data is all set. Now the scrape criteria builder. So I will go ahead and say new item, and I will say scrape criteria builder. And within that, as you remember, we're going to have our fields, we're going to have the set defaults, and then methods for setting each and every one of the fields. So let's go to the scrape criteria, get these guys just for reference, and we're going to start by commenting it out, Control KC, and then I will go ahead and start creating these. So I will first say it's the data. So string data. So then we are going to say string regex. Then regex options, regex option. And I import that as well. And then we have our list. So we're going to say private. You're going to have our list. And then we're just going to call that parts. So that's it. Now just import that from the data. Great. Now remember we have our constructor. So we have that. And then we have our set defaults method. And then we can basically just create that, generate that here, and go ahead and take these just to make it easier for ourselves and say data is basically nothing when we are using the default because there's nothing that we can use. The regex is obviously nothing. The regex option is none. So we can come here and say regex options dot none. So we have no options for that. And then the list is basically a newly constructed list. So it's an empty list. There you go. Now you can get rid of these. And then what we do is we basically go ahead and create the methods that allow us to mock each and every one of these fields. So say public scrape criteria builder, and we can say with data. Say string data. This is the tedious part basically, because we're gonna go ahead and create one for each the properties, but that's cool because afterwards it's going to pay off. And then regex is basically going to equal to regex. That's coming from the user, and with regex. And then after your regex, you can go ahead and do the same thing with regex options. So with regex option and regex options, here we are. And then we are going to say with part. Here's the interesting part though. So we are still returning back the scrape criteria builder, and we're saying with part, but here's the interesting part. You say scrape criteria part, right? But what you do is you add, so you say part, and you say, since it's a list, don't mock the list, add to the list. See what happened? So you're adding to the list of parts so that you can say, hey, within this HTML element, I want to search for one thing or two things or three things or however many things. So that you specify from within the parts. So that's great. Then come down here and say how you want to build it, right? So you say scrape criteria is what's going to be built out at the end. The method name is build, and then you're going to say scrape criteria and scrape criteria. And then you're going to say, let me mock each and every, well, not mock, but just basically stub each and every of these fields that I have created. So the data is going to equal to data regex, it's lowercase, regex is equal to regex, regex option equals to regex option, and then parts is basically going to equal to parts. And then you're going to say return, and you're going to return the scrape criteria. And there you go. Your first builder is complete. Here it is. And now we can go ahead and create our second builder. So the second builder is going to be for the parts. And you're going to say add new class. Go ahead and say scrape criteria part builder. So scrape criteria part builder. This is for the part. And very simply, you can still go to the data, grab whatever properties we're going to create in our builder, bring them in here just for reference, and just basically comment them out and say private string regex. That's the first one. Lowercase that private string regex options, and regex option it is. And these two are the ones that we need. Get rid of that. And then remember, you create the constructor with the set defaults. So defaults, and then you can create that method here. And then from within that, your regex is basically going to be, once again, an empty string as a default. Regex option is going to be regex options dot none, just because there's nothing. And then you're going to go ahead and create the methods. So first one is going to be public with regex string regex, and you are going to say regex equals regex, return this, and then you're going to say with regex option and you're going to pass in a regex option and assign that to your regex option. And at the end, you're going to tell it how to build. So it's going to be a scrape criteria part, and you're going to say build that. So you need to import that from the data, and then you're going to say, okay, well, that's that. You know, create a new object and say that has a regex on it, which I have already passed in, and it also has regex options on it, which I also have passed in. So regex option and regex option. Then you're going to say return this, and that'll do it. So you have your builder. Let's actually take a look at the other builder just to make sure I didn't miss anything. So set default with data with regex option with part. Everything is looking good, and you also have your data in here, and it's also looking good. And now we will be using these builders to actually build out a search criteria. So create some regular expressions that we will be using to create a pattern that will be looking through the HTML page that we will be downloading to then from that HTML page get what we want to get. And that will be our process of scraping.